It was a quiet, unassuming moment in the midst of a high-profile diplomatic summit. The world's most powerful leaders had gathered in a sleek, modern conference room to discuss trade agreements, global security, and the shifting balance of power. Amidst all the talk of economics and politics, one individual stood out in a way that no one expected. Scott Eastwood, Clint Eastwood's son, had never been a stranger to the spotlight. But today he wasn't there as a Hollywood actor or son of a legendary figure. He was there as a man on a mission, one that would forever change the course of history. As the summit's break neared, the leaders mingled, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. But Scott stood quietly off to the side, his eyes locked on one particular world leader, President Markov, the powerful leader of a nation known for its authoritarian regime and controversial policies. Scott had been preparing for this moment for months. He knew the stakes were high and the chance of success was slim, but he was determined. After years of watching his father's films, Scott had learned a valuable lesson from Clint. Sometimes, the most significant acts of bravery come in the smallest moments. And what Scott was about to do wasn't just small, it was a statement. With quiet determination, Scott walked up to President Markov, his steps firm and resolute. The room was filled with chatter, but for a brief moment, it all faded into silence. He extended his hand to the president, a small leather-bound Bible resting in his palm. "Sir, I believe this belongs in your hands," Scott said, his voice steady but carrying an undeniable weight. The words hung in the air, and for a second, no one moved. The other leaders and diplomats stood frozen, unsure of what to make of this moment. It was unheard of. A Hollywood actor's son handing a Bible to a world leader, especially one as controversial as Markov. The world's eyes were on them now, and Scott Eastwood had just made his move. What would happen next would shake the very foundation of the summit. The silence in the room was deafening as President Markov glanced down at the Bible in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His cold, calculating eyes studied the leather cover, the gold-embossed cross glinting in the soft light. The tension in the room thickened as if everyone were holding their breath. Scott remained calm, not flinching, not backing down. This wasn't about theatrics or drama. It was about making a stand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Markov raised his eyes and met Scott's gaze. "What makes you think I need this?" Markov's voice was as steely as his reputation, his words sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. The world held its breath. It was a direct challenge, a question that could have easily crushed anyone who wasn't prepared for it. But Scott stood tall, unwavering. "Because everyone needs something to believe in," he said simply, his words carrying a deeper meaning. "And sometimes it's faith that can change everything." The room was still. The press pool at the back of the room had begun to stir, their cameras poised, waiting for something to happen. They could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Markov, still holding the Bible, looked down at it again, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. For the first time, the hardened dictator appeared vulnerable, exposed. The room waited for his next move, but what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. A moment of silence passed before Markov did something no one had anticipated. Slowly, almost deliberately, he opened the Bible. The room held its breath. He began to read the first few verses, his voice low and steady. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." His words echoed through the quiet room, a stark contrast to the aggressive, power-hungry rhetoric he was known for. For a brief moment, it felt as though time itself had slowed down. The other world leaders exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what was happening, unsure of how to react. Scott remained calm, his hands folded in front of him, his eyes never leaving Markov. Was this a change of heart? Was this a sign of something deeper, something more profound than politics? Markov's voice faltered slightly as he continued reading, and when he finally finished, he closed the Bible and looked up at Scott. "Perhaps I've forgotten the power of faith," he said, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. The tension in the room had shifted. The man who had once been seen as ruthless and unyielding now appeared introspective, even vulnerable. And for a moment, just a moment, there was a glimmer of hope, a possibility that things could change. But no one could have predicted what came next. The unexpected turn of events that would follow would change everything. The world's media exploded. Headlines screamed of the unexpected moment that had taken place at the summit. Clint Eastwood's Son Hands Bible to World Leader sparks unexpected shift. It was an act of quiet defiance, an unspoken plea for something more than power and control. Social media platforms erupted with debates, support, and questions. Was this a genuine moment of reflection? Was President Markov opening himself up to change? Or was this all a calculated move? Experts weighed in from every corner of the globe. Political analysts dissected every word, every gesture, while religious leaders hailed the moment as a sign that faith could influence even the most hardened hearts. In the days that followed, Markov's speeches began to take on a slightly different tone. He spoke of unity, of faith, and of finding common ground. His policies, previously known for their harshness, seemed to soften, if only slightly. He met with international leaders more frequently, discussing peace and the possibility of reforms. Some saw it as a genuine transformation, while others suspected it was nothing more than a strategic political maneuver. But one thing was certain. Scott Eastwood's simple act of handing a Bible to President Markov had ignited a conversation that the world couldn't ignore. Scott Eastwood, however, remained out of the spotlight. As quickly as he had appeared, on the world stage he disappeared back into his personal life. He never sought recognition or fame for his actions, but the ripple effects of that single profound gesture would continue to reverberate for years to come. What had seemed like a small, quiet act, just a son giving a Bible to a world leader, had grown into something far larger than anyone could have imagined. It had sparked a conversation about the role of faith in leadership, about the power of belief to reshape hearts and minds, and about the possibility of change, even in the most entrenched of systems. Scott's father, Clint Eastwood, would later say in an interview, "Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to make the biggest impact. It's the quiet moments that can change everything." And in that quiet moment, when Scott Eastwood extended a Bible to President Markov, the world had been changed forever.